Being a Christian isn't simply about believing things. It's about doing things with what we believe, because that's what makes the difference. And I absolutely love Easter. I'm often asked, Andy, Easter and Christmas, it's like, that story, it's pretty much the same every year. How do you come up with new stuff to talk about? Christmas is challenging. Easter, not so much, because I just absolutely love Easter. And if this is your first time with us or the first time watching, here's something you need to know up front if you lose, interest or electricity between now and the end of the message. Here's what I want you to hear. We believe that Jesus rose from the dead, but we don't believe Jesus rose from the dead because the Bible tells us so. It's actually the other way around. If Jesus had not risen from the dead, there would be no Bible, there would be no church, and I would have no job, okay? So the sequence of these things is so important. The reason we believe is because the men and the women who were there in the moment for this, and the men who spent time with Jesus after he rose from the dead, talked about it. And then they wrote about it. And those documents were so valuable in the first century that they were protected. People protected these documents with their life. Matthew, who was a tax collector, who had scribes working for him, documented the life of Jesus in the first century. Mark, who spent time with Peter. Peter was a fisherman, probably illiterate. And Peter dictated his story to Mark, a Greek, who wrote down Peter's account of his time with Jesus. Luke, who opens his account of the life of Jesus by saying, I thoroughly investigated all of these things, talked to the eyewitnesses, and here's what I discovered. He wrote it down. John, who was with Jesus from the beginning, he gives us his account. Then Paul, the Apostle Paul, steps out of the pages of history. We'll talk about him in a minute, as a Jesus hater who persecuted the church. The Apostle Paul meets the resurrected Jesus, and he's one of the people who in the earliest, in fact, his document in 1 Corinthians is the earliest written testimony to the resurrection of Jesus just a few years after this event took place. And then my favorite one of all, and I know I say this all the time, James, the brother of Jesus, believed his brother was his Lord. And I just have to ask you, what would it take for your brother to convince you that he's the Son of God? You're like, it would never happen. Exactly. But James, this document in our New Testament is written by James, the brother of Jesus. When James later was dragged outside the city walls of Jerusalem and stoned to death, Josephus tells us about this. He was James the Just, who was leading the church when he was martyred. When James died, get this, he died believing Jesus, his brother, was his Lord.